You ever get that feeling like a spider crawling up your spine? That whisper in the back of your mind telling you something isn't right? I ignored it for weeks. Until the truth slammed into me like a freight train. The early 2000s. I was your average suburban dad. 2 kids. A modest home. A wife I thought I knew. Thought. We weren't rich, but we were doing fine. I worked full-time while my wife worked part-time at a local boutique. She said she loved the flexibility especially, since it gave her more time to take our kids, then, ages 4 and 6, to visit her parents. At first, I didn't question it. Her parents lived about 90 minutes away out in the countryside. Quiet, peaceful, the kind of place where time slows down. She said it was good for the kids to get away from the city noise. I agreed. But then something started to feel off. It was small things at first. The kids would come home and mention seeing Mummy's friend during their visit. Or say something like, "Mummy said not to tell you about the ice cream." Cute, but odd. And that little voice in my head, it started whispering louder. Asterisk. If you've ever had someone smile in your face while stabbing you in the back, this story is for you. If you've ever wished karma would come knocking with a sledgehammer, hit that like button. Subscribe for more true stories of betrayal, justice, and revenge that hits where it hurts. Because today, I'm going to tell you how I turned one man's secret affair with my wife into a personal apocalypse. How he shattered his world with the truth cold, calculated, and merciless. Let's begin at the crack in the foundation. Back then, my kids were young, bright-eyed, talkative, and brutally honest, like all children tend to be. They didn't lie, they didn't filter, and they noticed things. "Mummy went to a hotel today," my daughter once said while coloring at the kitchen table. My heart didn't just skip a beat. It went into cardiac arrest. I froze. "What did you say, sweetie?" She looked up, totally innocent. A hotel. It was big and smelled weird. My wife had told me they were going to her mom's house that day. I smiled through my clenched jaw, ruffled her hair, and told myself, maybe they'd stopped somewhere for lunch. Maybe it was nothing. But it wasn't just once. 2 or 3 times a week, the kids had some new odd little tidbit. And suddenly, her 90-minute visits seemed very suspicious. So I did something small, something quiet but powerful. I started tracking her car's mileage. Asterisk, I kept a notebook in the garage. Every time she left for her parents' place, I'd note the odometer. When she got back, I'd check it again. Week 1, 415 miles extra. Week 2, 397 miles. Week 3, 440. This wasn't a one-time detour. This was a full-blown routine. She wasn't just seeing her parents, she was racking up nearly 400 miles a week doing what? The stress started to eat at me. I wasn't sleeping. I found myself zoning out at work. Every time I looked at her, I saw a stranger smiling back. I confronted her softly at first. "Hey, the kids mentioned a hotel. Did you all stop somewhere during your trip?" She blinked, then laughed it off. "Oh no. That must have been something on TV or something. You know how they mix stuff up." She was a terrible liar. Her voice got high-pitched. She couldn't meet my eyes. Her hand trembled slightly as she tucked her hair behind her ear. That night, she kissed me goodnight, like nothing was wrong. I felt like I was suffocating. Asterisk then. Fate handed me a gift. She left a sticky note next to the home computer. Her AOL password. Maybe it was careless. Maybe it was arrogance. Maybe she wanted to get caught. I stared at that note for hours, heart pounding. Finally, I typed it in. Her inbox. Loaded. And I read. Email after email between her and her college best friend. No shame, no hesitation. They talked about how she was getting back with Bob, an old high school flame. About how exciting it was to have dirty lunch breaks and motel meets. About how Bob's wife had let herself go after kids, and wasn't a threat. I was shaking. It was surreal. Like reading someone else's life. But it was mine. My marriage. My wife. Destroyed in plain text. Asterisk, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just went numb. Everything blurred. Her laugh echoed in my ears. The way she tucked the kids in at night, humming. The photos on the fridge. Our wedding photo. Was all of it a lie? Was I just a placeholder until she found her next thrill? That night, I printed the emails. I hid them in my toolbox in the garage. And I started to change. Something in me snapped, not in rage, but in clarity. She'd made her choice. Now I'd make mine. Asterisk. I called a friend of mine, an old buddy who'd joined the police force years ago. He listened quietly, then gave me a name. Ron. He used to be one of us. Now, he's a pie. If anyone can get you what you need, it's him. I met Ron the next day in a dingy diner off I-90. He was a thick-set guy, weathered face, chain smoker. No nonsense. I gave him everything I had, the printed emails, the mileage logs, the weird stories from the kids. He nodded slowly. You want photos, names, dates. All of it, I said. He scribbled a number on a napkin. His retainer, I paid in cash. Asterisk, it didn't take long. Within 2 weeks, Ron handed me a thick folder. Inside, time-stamped photos, receipts, and detailed logs. She wasn't going to her parents. She was dropping the kids off with them, then meeting Bob. They'd have lunch, then disappear into a cheap roadside motel for hours. Then she'd return, pick up the kids, come home, kiss me, act like the world was normal. I flipped through the photos, her with Bob at restaurants, stepping out of his car, holding hands, entering motel rooms. I felt like vomiting, but I didn't. I filed it away, like a general preparing for war. Asterisk, I asked Ron, can you find out more about Bob? Ron smirked. Already on it. A few days later, I had Bob's full bio. Married, 3 kids, vice president of sales for his father-in-law's company. Lived in a house his in-laws owned. Golden boy. Perfect life. But not for long. Asterisk, that's when I started planning. This wouldn't be a screaming match. No melodramatic showdowns. No. This would be silent. Surgical. Cold as steel. I met with a divorce lawyer, told him everything. He said the affair wouldn't help much in court, but I didn't care. This wasn't just about legalities. This was personal. I had Ron make extra copies of his report, and then I asked him for one last favor. One final visit that would set everything in motion. Some people deserve mercy. Bob wasn't one of them. You ever watch a house burn down? Not from a distance. I mean, really watch it. From the sidewalk. You see it start with one flicker, one silent spark, and then suddenly, the walls are glowing orange. The windows shatter. The roof caves in. I watched Bob's life go up in flames the same way. Except this fire was my doing. Asterisk, I had everything I needed, hard evidence of the affair. Names, dates, photos, and I had the knowledge that Bob was living a lie just like my wife had been. My lawyer had drawn up the divorce papers. It was time to light the fuse. I wasn't going to confront her at home, not in front of the kids. No. This needed to hit her when she least expected it. It had to be public, embarrassing, undeniable. So I had her served at work. I'll never forget the call I got from her coworkers, someone who didn't know me well, but was sympathetic. She just collapsed in the break room, they said. She's crying and screaming. What happened? I didn't answer. Let her scream. Asterisk. But that wasn't even the main course. That same day, down to the hour, I had Ron set up a private meeting with Bob's wife. Her name was Melissa. She was quiet, graceful, wore pain on her face like someone who had learned to swallow too many lies. She met Ron at a park near her kid's school. Ron didn't sugarcoat anything. He showed her the photos, the dates, the email excerpts. He said, she didn't cry. She didn't even speak for a long while. She just stared at the proof, her fingers trembling slightly. Then she looked up and said 5 words that told me everything I needed to know. He doesn't get to win. The next 72 hours were chaos, delicious, justified chaos. Melissa played it smart. She didn't confront him right away. She waited until Bob was asleep. She packed her bags, packed the kids' clothes, cleaned out their joint bank account every cent. She left him a printed copy of the pie report on his nightstand. When Bob woke up, his wife, kids, and money were gone. And then the phone rang. It was her father, Bob's boss. He had seen the report. C. Bob worked for Melissa's family business, specifically under her father, who had made him VP of sales as a wedding gift. It wasn't earned. It was inherited through marriage. But marriage, that was over. Melissa's father didn't yell. He didn't rage. He simply revoked Bob's company privileges and fired him effective immediately. No job. No wife. No kids. No money. And then, like a cherry on top, Bob got served with eviction papers, because the house he and Melissa lived in, also owned by her parents. Asterisk, while Bob's life crumbled in real time, mine was undergoing its own controlled demolition. My wife came home after being served like a ghost of herself. No screams, no denials. She just stood in the doorway, holding the divorce papers like they were covered in blood. You set me up, she whispered. I looked her dead in the eye and said, no, you set yourself up. I just turned the lights on. We agreed to talk only about the kids. Nothing more. Moved into the guest room. We alternated schedules until we could figure out custody. It was awkward, cold, but civil, and it was about to get even more uncomfortable for her. Because the fallout from Bob's collapse was loud. Bob tried to talk his way back into Melissa's life. Texts, calls, emails, apologies, promises. She ignored them all. Then he tried to intimidate her. He showed up at her parents' house, screaming about betrayal and ruined lives. Her brother stepped in. What happened next ended up in court records. Let's just say Bob left with a broken nose, a restraining order, and his tail tucked between his legs. It didn't end there. A few weeks later, Bob got arrested for violating the order. He'd tried to confront Melissa at her new job, yes. The same family company. She took over Bob's old clients. Another arrest followed after he'd vandalized her car. He spent time in county jail. His reputation, once solid and respectable, was now toilet paper. One day, I got a random email from Bob. Just one line. You think you won? I didn't reply. I didn't have to, because every part of his life that mattered had already turned to ash. His wife was rebuilding her life with grace. His kids were adjusting. His father-in-law had replaced him with someone competent. And me, I was calm, detached, free. People always imagine revenge like it's some dramatic scream fest. Furniture flying. Cheaters exposed in crowded restaurants. But that's not real power. Real power. It's the silence after the storm. It's when your enemy looks around and realizes everything is gone and you're the one who pulled the last Ganga piece. It's control. It's precision. It's being so calm that your enemies can't tell if you're dangerous or just done. I focused on the kids. They were confused, sad, but young enough to bounce back. I never badmouthed their mum in front of them. That was key. Because my revenge wasn't about hurting her. It was about protecting me. About building something better from the rubble. Therapy helped. So did reconnecting with old friends. Picking up hobbies I'd forgotten. Breathing. I watched my ex fumble her way through online dating. Watched her job hours get cut. She moved in with a friend temporarily before finally renting a tiny apartment. She tried to be sweet, apologetic. Even hinted once that maybe, someday, we could talk. I shut that down fast. Eventually, Bob vanished. Gone. From social media. No LinkedIn. Nothing. I heard a rumor that he left the state. Started over in some dusty town out west. Probably changed jobs. Changed names. Maybe even changed his story. But you can't outrun what you did. You can't unburn what's already ash. You know what's funny? They thought they were being clever. Sneaking around, laughing about how Bob's wife had let herself go. About how I'd never find out. They saw kindness as weakness, stability as boring, loyalty as foolish. But here's what I learned. The quiet ones. The ones you underestimate. We're the ones you should fear most. Because when we rise, we don't just walk away, we bury you. If this story gave you chills, smash that like button and drop a comment. What's the most satisfying revenge you've ever seen or dreamed of? And don't forget to subscribe for more raw, real, emotionally charged Reddit revenge stories that'll have you screaming. They got what they deserved. The first morning after my wife moved out, I woke up in a house that was half empty and dead quiet. The silence was deafening. No soft thud of little feet running down the hall. No clanging of cereal bowls. No forced small talk over coffee. Just me and 1,000 broken pieces. You don't realize how much of your identity is wrapped up in someone else until they're gone. But I wasn't sad. I was raw, exposed, and somehow free. For the first time in years. I'd spent so many years being the good husband, the dependable dad, the provider, always working, always sacrificing, while she was checking into motels with a guy who'd peaked in high school. It hit me like a freight train. Who the hell am I when I'm not being lied to? I didn't have an answer, so I started small. Could breathe without wondering what lie was being whispered behind my back. Mornings became mine. I'd make coffee, sit in silence, no phone, no emails, just breathing. I joined a gym not because I wanted abs, but because I needed a punching bag that wouldn't call me insecure for asking questions. I picked up hobbies I dropped a decade ago. Photography, hiking, reading nonfiction. The more time I spent alone, the more I realized I liked me. Not the version I had to be in a crumbling marriage. The real me. I made a promise to myself and my kids that I would be present. Not just there physically, but emotionally, mentally. I'd seen firsthand what my own parents' cheating did to my childhood. The yelling, the manipulation, the way they used us as pawns in their sick little chess game. I refused to do that to my kids. No matter what their mother had done to me, I would never let them see it on my face. I answered their questions gently, never blamed her. Just told them mommy and daddy weren't going to live together anymore. But they were still deeply loved, because they were. They still are. Asterisk. While I was finding peace, Bob was digging his own grave. Ron the Pike kept tabs on him for a while, mostly out of curiosity. Turns out, Bob tried to land a job in sales again. He interviewed with a competitor of his former father-in-law's company. The interview went well, until they found out who he was. Apparently, the sales industry in our region was tighter than I'd imagined. Word spread fast about the guy who blew up his marriage, got fired by his wife's dad, and tanked his life. No one wanted to touch him. He moved into a dingy studio apartment near the highway. No job, no family. Just a LinkedIn profile that hadn't been updated since 2003. Asterisk. One day, out of the blue, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. It was Melissa, Bob's ex-wife. She sounded stronger, confident, like someone who'd been through fire and came out diamond. I just wanted to say thank you, she said. You didn't have to show me those photos, but you did, and you saved my life. I didn't know what to say. I think I just nodded for a while. Then she added something I'll never forget. He used to make me feel like I was lucky to have him. Turns out, I was lucky to escape him. Asterisk. About a year later, my wife reached out. She wanted to catch up, said we owed it to the kids to reconnect. She suggested lunch, casual, no pressure. I almost said no, but curiosity got the better of me. We met at a cafe near her new apartment. She looked different, older, tired, like someone who'd seen herself in the mirror for the first time in a long time and didn't like what she saw. She made small talk for a while. Then she said it. I made a huge mistake. I sipped my coffee and waited. I thought he was exciting, passionate, but it wasn't real. None of it. I said nothing. Do you think there's any chance we could ever start over? I looked her dead in the eye. No. She blinked, stood up, dropped her 20 on the table, and walked out without another word. Asterisk. Closure doesn't come from apologies. It comes from growth. From knowing that the pain didn't destroy you, it shaped you. From realizing that even though someone cracked your foundation, you built something stronger in its place. She didn't get a dramatic speech. She didn't get forgiveness. She got silence. And I got peace. Asterisk. Now that the kids are older adults, really I've told them the truth. Gently, with care. They asked questions. They cried then. They hugged me. My daughter once said something that gutted me in the best possible way. You never made us feel broken. Even when everything around us was, that was the real victory. Asterisk. Some betrayals crack your world open. But sometimes, the crack is exactly what you needed to let the light in. Revenge is satisfying, but rebuilding is sacred. Asterisk. I thought the past was buried. But ghosts don't stay dead for long. It had been years since the storm, the divorce, the screaming silence, the revenge. Life had moved on. The kids were older, independent, thriving. I'd found peace in my own little ways, small victories, routines, friendships that didn't require explanations. My ex-wife had faded into the background. We coexisted like strangers attending the same funeral. Civil, quiet, distant, and Bob was dust. Or so I thought. Asterisk. By now, my life was in a rhythm. I'd gone back to school part-time, picked up contract work. Nothing fancy, but it gave me time to rebuild on my terms. There was even someone new. Her name was Ava. We met at a mutual friend's holiday gathering. She was warm, grounded, funny in that dry, intelligent way that cuts right through the noise. It wasn't love at first sight. It was better. It was trust at first truth. She knew I'd been through hell, and instead of running away, she stayed. Asterisk. One Thursday morning, while sipping coffee and scrolling through my inbox, I saw it, a name I hadn't seen in half a decade. Bob Sanders, for 2 at protonmail.com. Subject, line, you think this is over? My stomach turned to stone. For a split second, I thought it had to be spam, maybe a prank, but curiosity grabbed me by the throat. I clicked it. Inside a single line. You ruined my life. Hope you're proud of what you've become. There was no attachment, no threats, just venom. A spark of that old rage lit up in my chest, but this time, it fizzled out as quickly as it came. I wasn't that man anymore. But something told me this wasn't random. Asterisk. Over the next few days, weird things started happening. An unfamiliar car parked outside my house for 3 nights in a row. Blocked calls at 2 a.m. One morning, my tires were slashed. I didn't jump to conclusions, but I called Ron the private investigator just in case. Asterisk. Ron hadn't changed a bit. Still gruff, still sharp, still loyal. He met me at a diner, sipped black coffee, and said, "You think it's Bob?" "I don't know," I said. "But someone's trying to rattle me." He tapped his fingers on the table. "If it's him, I'll find out." Within 48 hours, Ron had what he needed. Asterisk. Turns out Bob hadn't just left the state, he'd left his name behind too. New alias. New state. A trail of failed jobs, evictions, a DUI. But then he resurfaced in my city 2 months ago, quietly. He was living under a pseudonym in a rundown extended stay hotel, working part-time under the table at a body shop. Ron even got a photo. I stared at the man on the page, bloated, unshaven, eyes sunken. A shell of the cocky clean-cut VP, who once laughed at my wife's jokes in a motel bed. And now he was back. Why? Ron's theory was simple. He's broke, bitter, alone. You're the boogeyman. In his version of the story. Asterisk. I didn't want to retaliate, not directly. I was past that. But I wasn't about to let this become a new war. Either. I filed a police report about the tires, and blocked calls, kept it on record, in case it escalated. Ron kept his eye on Bob, quietly from a distance. Asterisk. Ava noticed something was off. One night, over dinner, she gently asked, "You've been quiet, distant, what's going on?" I hesitated, then told her everything about Bob, the affair, the fallout, the email. She didn't flinch, just took my hand and said, "You don't need to fight this ghost again. You already won." That hit me. She was right. A week later, I got a call. Wasn't Bob Dot. It was Melissa, Bob's ex-wife. Her voice was tight, urgent. "Has he contacted you?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Email, maybe more." "Why?" She sighed. "He showed up at my job today, just waiting outside." That knot in my gut returned. "He's unraveling," she said. "I thought you should know." I thanked her. Hung up then. I made a decision. Asterisk. I didn't want to press charges. Didn't want to drag it into court. But I did want Bob to know that I wasn't afraid. So I went to that hotel. Ron came with me, parked a few blocks away in case things got heated. I knocked on room 212. After a few moments, the door creaked open. He looked like hell. His eyes widened. "You," he muttered. "Yeah," I said, calm, even. He laughed bitterly. "Come to gloat?" "No," I said, "just wanted you to see the face of the man who didn't need to lift a finger to destroy you. You did that all by yourself." He didn't respond. I turned to leave. But before I reached the stairs, I said, "Stay away from me, from Melissa, from our kids, or I will bury you again. Legally, publicly, and this time, permanently." Asterisk. A few days later, Bob vanished again. Left the hotel. No forwarding address. Ron couldn't find him. This time, I didn't care. He was just a whisper. Now, a ghost without a grave. Asterisk. Sometimes revenge isn't fire and fury. Sometimes, it's survival. It's outliving the people who tried to break you. It's being happy when they're miserable. It's showing up with your head held high, while they disappear into shadows. Bob thought I destroyed his life. But really, he did that all by himself. You don't just walk out of betrayal and into love. You limp. You bleed. And if you're lucky, someone stays anyway. After Bob disappeared again, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. Don't get me wrong. The fear was gone. The edge. The shadow under my skin. But there was no music playing. No dramatic swell. Just a slow exhale I didn't know I'd been holding for years. It's a strange thing. When the war ends, but your armor's still on. And that's when I realized, surviving isn't the same as living. I had more work to do. Asterisk. Ava had been patient. Unbelievably. So, she never pried. Never demanded. But she saw me. The broken parts. The jagged edges. And didn't flinch. One night, I told her everything. The whole timeline. The emails. The pie. The motel photos. Bob, my ex. The revenge. All of it. Expected her to be overwhelmed, maybe even scared off. Instead, she reached across the table, took my hand, and said, "You're not a man who destroyed someone. You're a man who rebuilt himself." Asterisk. Learning to love again is like learning to walk after a car crash. Every step feels unnatural. Every smile feels suspicious. You don't just give your heart, you hold it back, rationed and cautious. But Ava, she never rushed me. She celebrated the small moments when I let her leave a toothbrush at my place. She didn't joke. She didn't make it a milestone. Just smiled and tucked it next to mine. When I held her hand in public for the first time, she squeezed back without a word. No fanfare, just presence. Asterisk, but make no mistake, healing isn't linear. There were days when I heard a random ringtone and flinched, thinking it was my ex. Nights when I dreamed I was back in that motel, watching from outside. Powerless. Moments when I'd question everything again, my judgment, my worth, my instincts. Ava never tried to fix those moments. She just existed through them with me, and that made all the difference. Asterisk, months later, while clearing out a storage closet, I found an old box labeled legal documents. Inside, my original copy of the divorce papers, photos from the Pi report, a printed copy of Bob's first threatening email, a handwritten note I'd once drafted for my kids, something I'd written in the early days when I wasn't sure I'd survive the storm. I sat down on the floor and read every word. I cried, not from pain, from gratitude, because that man, that broken, bleeding, betrayed version of me, he made it. Asterisk, I didn't plan to propose. Not at first. But love has a funny way of becoming undeniable. It was a rainy Sunday. We were making pancakes in her tiny kitchen, dancing to Etta James, laughing about nothing. And in the middle of that song, as the rain hit the window, I looked at her hair a mess, flour on her nose, and I just knew. I didn't have a ring, no speech. I just said, will you keep dancing with me for the rest of our lives? She stared at me, then smiled. Always. Asterisk, it wasn't big. Just us, the kids, and a few close friends. My daughter walked me down the aisle. My son gave a toast that left everyone in tears. My ex was not invited. This wasn't about exclusion. It was about protection. Boundaries matter. The ceremony was short, simple, pure. The vows, not promises of perfection, just presence. Asterisk. After the wedding, something unexpected happened. My old Pi, Ron, called me. Said he had a client, a woman who'd just discovered her husband was cheating. She was scared, paralyzed. And Ron had told her my story. She wants to talk to someone who's been through it, he said. Would you be willing? I didn't hesitate. Asterisk, her name was Leah. She sounded like I used to, shaking, ashamed, unsure what was real. We talked for hours. She cried. I listened. Then I told her the truth. It's going to feel like the world is ending, but it's not. It's just the beginning of your freedom. She thanked me, voice cracking, said she felt less alone. And for the first time I realized something. All that pain, all that destruction, it had a purpose. It made me a lighthouse. Asterisk, they say, revenge is best served cold. But peace is served warm. It's waking up beside someone who knows your scars and doesn't flinch. It's watching your kids smile again. It's helping someone else survive the same storm that once almost drowned you. Bob's gone. My ex is a footnote. But Ava, she's the chapter I never saw coming. And me, I'm finally writing the story I deserve. Asterisk, revenge gave me justice. Healing gave me peace. But it was forgiveness not for them, but for myself that gave me freedom. Life was calm now. Ava and I had just returned from a weekend getaway. Nothing fancy. Just a cabin near the lake. No cell signal. No distractions. The kind of silence that feels like a hug. But peace has a funny way of being interrupted by echoes from the past. One evening, after dinner, my daughter lingered in the kitchen. She was 21 now, bright, confident, so much wiser than I ever was at that age. Dad, she said gently, can I ask you something uncomfortable? I nodded. My stomach tightened. She sat across from me, eyes serious. Why didn't you ever tell us what really happened with Mom? Asterisk, I'd rehearsed this talk 100 times in my head. But now that it was real, I couldn't breathe. I wanted to protect you, I said. She didn't look away. But we were there, Dad. We knew something was off. And not knowing the truth made us blame ourselves. That hit like a hammer. So I told her. Everything. The lies, the affair, the motel, the emails, the Pi, the divorce, the downfall, even Bob. She didn't cry. She just listened. Then, after a long silence, she said, you should have hated her, but you never did. You just kept being our dad. And then she hugged me. Tight. Long. like a thank you that had waited a decade to be sent. Asterisk. A week later, an envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside, a handwritten letter. It was from my ex-wife. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need to say this. The letter was raw, not polished, not manipulative, just exhausted. She was sick, something chronic, not fatal, but enough to break her down physically and emotionally. And in the quiet hours of her life, guilt had caught up with her. I thought I was chasing excitement, but I was just running from responsibility, from myself, and I destroyed the one good man who ever really loved me. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't ask for anything. She just wanted me to know that she knew what she'd done, and that she was sorry. Asterisk. I didn't write her back. Not because I hated her, but because I had nothing left to say. Forgiveness doesn't always mean RECONNECTION. Sometimes it just means letting go of the rope you've been pulling on for far too long. And in that moment, with that letter in my hands, I realized something. I hadn't just survived her betrayal, I'd outgrown it. Asterisk. That night, I sat with both of my kids on the back porch. We watched the stars, sipped cocoa, listened to the crickets. Then I said something I'd never said before. I want you both to know what your mother did. It wasn't about you. It wasn't even really about me. It was about someone who couldn't be happy with herself, and broke the people who loved her because of it. They nodded. No anger, no judgment. Just understanding. That's all I'd ever wanted. Asterisk. That was the final thread. The final ghost. There was nothing left to fight. No one left to chase. No part of myself left stuck in the past. I packed up the last remnants of that life. The divorce papers, the photos, the emails, even the letter, and drove to the lake. I burned them, not out of rage, but as a ritual. A release. Ashes floated into the breeze, and with them, my last trace of pain. Asterisk. People think revenge is the peak of the story, the climax, but it's not. The real climax is what you do after. Do you become bitter, suspicious, closed off? Or do you rebuild? Do you let the betrayal define your life? Or do you take the pen back and write something better? I chose to rebuild. I chose love. Not just romantic love, but love for myself, for peace, for honesty, for stillness. Asterisk. Years ago, I was the guy standing in a driveway, staring at motel photos with tears in his eyes. Now, I'm the guy helping others out of their darkness. And if you're there now, if you're at the edge, questioning everything, hear this. You are not what they did to you. You are what you choose to become next. Asterisk. If this final chapter brought you closure, or gave you hope, smash that like button, and drop a comment below. What helped you let go of pain you never thought you'd survive? Subscribe for more true, raw stories about betrayal, justice, and rebuilding a life worth living. And remember, revenge is the spark, but peace is the fire that lights your way forward. See you in the next story.